Is the US about to welcome its 51st state? Be it annexation by force, negotiation, or in exchange for cold hard cash? President Donald Trump has reiterated his desire to take control of Greenland. He says it's for national security purposes, but could it put global security and the future of NATO at risk? It's up for debate on Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. US President Donald Trump has made no secret of what's been on the top of his wish list since his first term in office.
Greenland. We need it for national protection. We need Greenland. We need Greenland.
Essentially, it's a large real estate deal.
People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. We need Greenland, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
Trump's threats of annexation had largely been dismissed until the weekend operation to capture Nicolás Maduro. The speed and apparent ease at which the US imposed its will on Venezuela has supercharged concern. When pressed on its plans, the White House wouldn't rule out the use of military force.
And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
I think it's a big one.
You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
The semi-autonomous island remains part of Denmark. The Danish Prime Minister says US threats against a staunch European ally plays right into enemy hands.
If the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That includes NATO and thus the security that the alliance has provided since the end of the Second World War.
We'll ask our panel, will the US actually take Greenland by force? Would any European country oppose the US and come to Greenland's aid? And would it be the end of NATO? Joining us for this discussion is Bijan Kian, President of the Institute for Voices of Liberty and a former US official who has served under President Trump. Carl Bildt is joining us, co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations and former Prime Minister of Sweden. And rounding out our panel, Rasmus Jarlov, Danish MP and from the Conservative Party, who is chair of the Parliament's Defence Committee. Gentlemen, thank you and welcome to Counterpoints. The US has set its sights very squarely on Greenland. And according to senior White House aide Stephen Miller, they're not ruling out taking it by force. Quite astonishing, to put it mildly, considering it's an autonomous region of a NATO ally, Denmark. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was less hostile in his approach, though, and suggested the US is drafting an offer to buy the strategic island. Kian, let's start with you for a US perspective. Will the US take Greenland by force?
Well, that is yet to be seen. Good morning and good evening to you and distinguished guests. The method President Trump negotiates by is like this. He takes the upper hand, he asks for the whole world, and then he will work his way down to what he can get. That's his style. So will the US ever use force against conceptually a NATO ally? I think there is a lot of room for negotiations. I think there are two ways to approach this, and we're all friendly allies this morning here, so there's no hostile position, so we can talk about it. One way is to take the harsh road that Trump is taking. The other way is to look at the legitimate concerns of the United States and ask the questions. Is Russia going to continue its militarization? Is China going to continue its expansionism in economics and access to resources? with the melting ice, our new waterways opening up that would give Russia an advantage, making things shorter and more accessible. And it's the concern by the United States that it's not about ships circling Greenland or subs, being, increased in numbers and in routes and tailgating U.S. ships. It's not about that. It's about the perspective. It's about the future, the greater Arctic picture that worries the United States. Now, we do have the 1951 Pact, and there is a way to go and strengthen it to be able to do things like joint investments together. I mean, this doesn't have to be a confrontational structure. It can be a cooperation between all countries having a stake in this, where we have to place confidence in the actions of others. We look at their recent performance, and there is no comfort to be given. If I'm asked, okay, Bijan, go to President Trump and give him 5 reasons that he need not worry about Greenland, what would I tell him? What would I say to him? How would I reduce? How would I mitigate the existing risk? We don't have to be as confrontational as we can be.
Okay.
We can be as cooperative as we can be. And that's where I see the picture. The picture is not to add to a world full of turmoil, not to add another layer of problems, is to address the concerns. If they're valid, they must be addressed.
Okay. Carl, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but let me get Rasmus's response directly to that, because by the sounds of what you're saying there, Kian, the US is going to have it, whether it's confrontation or negotiation. It doesn't have to be a confrontation, as Kian is saying, but Rasmus, it sounds like one way or the other.
There's a lot of issues. NATO is going to be impacted if there is a move by force.
Okay.
It's going to some impact on NATO, which is a greater cost
Indeed.
to the United States.
We're going to come to NATO in a little bit later on in our discussion. Yeah, we're going to come to NATO specifically. Rasmus, what's your take on what Kian is saying there? It sounds like it's a done deal. All Greenland has to decide, all Denmark has to decide, is how they hand it over.
We're not going to hand Greenland over under any circumstances whatsoever. And then it's up to the United States how much of a confrontation they want to make out of that situation. Regardless of what pressure they will apply to us, what threats they will give to us, they're not getting Greenland. It's absolutely out of the question. There's 57,000 people living in Greenland. They do not want to become part of the United States. And there is no way we can let 57,000 Danish citizens become part of a country that they don't want to become part of. So
Rasmus, whether or not those 57,000 people or Denmark itself wants to hand it over, if the US wants it, the US will take it.
No. I mean, it's probably the most unjustified land claim in modern history. There is not a shadow of a justification or legitimacy behind it. There's no historical ownership. There is no broken treaties. There's no threat from Greenland. Greenland is a very loyal ally to the United States. Neither Denmark nor Greenland has done anything hostile to the United States. There are no drug lords. There is no illegitimate government in either Denmark or Greenland. There's no excuse for wanting to annex or invade it or whatever the Americans think they can do. We can't decide what the Americans will do, but we are not going to give into it under any circumstances.
Carl, what's your take on this crisis? We've got two very opposing views there. Will they take it? Will US, if Greenland, if Denmark don't, as Kian was saying, take into account these concerns that the US has, do you think the US could go in militarily?
Well, they haven't excluded it, which I think is fairly extraordinary, that they don't exclude taking military action against an ally. I mean, that's unheard of in sort of international diplomacy and international politics. If you talk about the US concerns, I must confess that I have some difficulties understanding that. They talk about, President Trump talks about sort of Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. There's nothing of the sort. No one has seen this particular Russian and Chinese ships except himself. But even if they were, it so happens that Denmark, accordingly Greenland, is part of NATO. We have a joint defense commitment. Even Sweden, as a matter of fact, on paper, has a commitment to help with the defense of Greenland if there were to be any threat that is credible. If there were a threat, if there were a security situation, you bring it into NATO, you bring in the forces that are necessary. At the moment, the assessment that is made by the US military is obviously that there is no threat whatsoever. I don't think, as a matter of fact, that the US has any protection even for its own single remaining base there, against polar bears perhaps. But apart from the polar bears, no one has seen any threat worthy of the name in Greenland. So when Mr. Trump is speaking in these terms, I mean, he's in a fantasy world. I wonder who briefs him, or if anyone briefs him, or if he reads comics. I don't know. It's difficult to understand.
All right. Is he living in a fantasy world then? I can see you grinning.
I have a question that's not answered. If you could please repeat that question. The question is, do you acknowledge or deny, completely summarily dismiss all of concerns of the United States? And if you do acknowledge concerns of the United States, which concerns do you acknowledge? Second question, does Denmark have the capability to build a shield against those concerns alone? Does it have the ability to do that? I mean, we've determined there are two ways to handle this. To take hard positions and ignore each other's concerns is not the way to start the diplomatic process. If we are to go to the diplomatic box, we have to start with simple questions like, do you acknowledge or deny United States concerns? It sounds to me that we're leaning towards denial of all of U.S. concerns.
What are the concerns?
I mean, we talk about diplomatic process. You said that one should start with the diplomatic process. That is not
China
exactly what
not exploring icebreakers?
Well, I mean, but none. Well, they could have most of their polar research ships are in Antarctica, by the way. And to my knowledge, they've never been in.
Sit down and address the concerns of U.S.
Let me say that if there is a U.S. concern, there are channels to express them, and those channels are both the bilateral with Denmark and NATO. And NATO is there to look at the concerns of for the security of Sweden, Denmark, the United States, Bulgaria, and whatever. We do that together. And to my knowledge, the US has not expressed any concern with the security through the normal channels, diplomatic or NATO. It is just something coming from the president, and no one really understands where he got it from. It's a fantasy world.
Okay,
well, here we go.
Bijan?
You acknowledge 1951 pact, but you are not acknowledging ways to strengthen and enhance it, because the United States believes the pact is not enough. Multilateralism is very good. It's theoretically the way to go, but it takes a lot of time. If you want to do that, tell everyone, stop the activity.
NATO can react very fast. If there were concern for the security of Greenland, an acute situation, and it was brought to Article 5, I think there are quite a number of countries that can deploy forces fairly fast to Greenland, including Canada, United States, Denmark, Norway, United Kingdom. That's what NATO is there for.
Rasmus, let's get your response to that, and then Bijan, I'll get you to respond to both of those. Is there a threat? Is President Trump living in a fantasy world?
Yeah, he is. There is no threat from China or Russia against Greenland. They don't have any activity in Greenland. They don't have a consulate. They don't have mining. They don't own anything. You'll struggle to find even a Chinese restaurant in Greenland. That's how little of a presence the Chinese have. So this idea that they're about to take over Greenland is a complete fantasy. And secondly, I also want to say that we will be happy to take relevant American concerns and talk about them and see what we can do about them. But you have to express them. We don't owe to say that we take American concerns seriously if they don't tell us what they are. And I also want to say that if you start using the logic that Denmark cannot alone defend Greenland and therefore the United States have a right to take it, a lot of countries are going to be in trouble. You know, Ireland can't defend Ireland alone. Portugal can't defend Portugal alone, and they're not supposed to. They're supposed to do their part. Denmark does its part. We've spent about 3% of a rather rapidly growing GDP in 2025. We're the leading contributor in Ukraine per capita. No one else has paid as much to that fight against Russia as we have. And we have participated and taken some of the toughest fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other wars. So we are really doing our part. And if the United States response to a loyal ally like that is, we're going to attack you, we don't rule out using military force against you, and we're going to try to take your territory, then nobody is going to want to be an ally of the United States. The value of being an ally to the United States is dropping like a rock when things like this take place. And it has to stop, because otherwise there won't be a Western alliance. The United States is going to be alone against China, and we'll have to look for other partners. We don't want to do that. We want to continue to have a good relationship with the Americans, but these threats and this idea that they have a right to take territory from so-called allies, that's the actions of enemies. And you can't start negotiations like that and say, now we have to be civil and we have to talk together and you don't have to have a confrontation when you're starting out by threatening with military force against another country.
Okay, Bijan, I want you to respond to that and also bring in the notion that President Trump has repeatedly said it's about national security. The same way he used to say Venezuela was about drugs. But in reality, is this economic? Is this another US resources grab?
Well, how can you separate economics from national security? National security bills are paid by the economics. They're very closely related and interdependent.
So you think that this is about rare earth minerals more than stopping Russia and China from threatening Greenland?
It's all competitive. It's all competitive. What is China after? Rare earth? Critical minerals? Same thing. It's all the same objective. You can paint it in national security color, or you can paint it in economic advantage color. It boils down to the same thing. It's leverage. It's leverage. And United States is right. I can say confidently that denying United States concerns summarily and say, no, there should be no concern. There is no concerns. Is like denying China's expansionism and mercantilism and denying Russia's militarization completely. It's like, no, Russia is not militarizing. China is not expanding in grabbing resources. I don't think that argument would stick in any reasonable setting. No one said that. There are no ships, there are no installations now, but that potential must be. So don't dismiss the concerns of the United States. Address them as you're suggesting. You're saying we should sit down and talk. We're talking, and you're dismissing the concerns in a summary fashion.
Okay, Rasmus, what have you?
Well, you're talking nonsense, though. You're talking nonsense, and if you call nonsense a U.S. concern, it doesn't make it any less nonsense. You're talking about ships that are not there. You're talking about militarization of China. Yes, that's happening, but it has nothing to do with Greenland. So you have to come up with relevant concerns, and we'll be happy to
call it. But when you deny that the ice is melting and opening new sea routes, and when you deny that Russia is after getting those same resources that you're discussing, you're denying a reality. And you can call it nonsense or whatever you like. It is a reality.
But no one has said anything about denying that the ice is melting. I think that's the American president that usually does deny that climate is warming up. We already have this.
Just to open up the negotiations. And what I hear here is that there is a desire to solve the problem. As long as there is a desire to reduce this tension, I believe there are ways to strengthen the 1951 Pact and also go into joint investments, do things together. You can explore in a commercial free setting in a way that standards would be applied, not through sneaky ways of doing things that don't look like you're doing anything, but all of a sudden it hits.
Okay, Carl, go ahead. What have you got to say, Carl? I can see you shaking your head.
No one is denying U.S. firms the right to invest in Greenland under the existing laws, but they haven't done it. I mean,
the U.S. is not
just let Carl finish that point there, Bijan. Carl, continue.
Just not excluding that option.
Just let Carl finish that point there. Carl, keep going.
No. I mean, so I understand it. I mean, you're free to invest in Greenland. I mean, we had a Swedish operated mine there quite some time ago, as a matter of fact, and at the moment there are not very many mining activities there, but there have been companies exploring, I guess, including American ones. It's primarily Australians that are interested at the moment, if I remember it rightly. And I understand that Greenland, they've said so. They are very open to foreign investment. As a matter of fact, they want it also in the mining industry. Then there are sort of environmental and labor and other concerns that makes it and the very harsh environment. And that is the reason, I guess, why there has been fairly limited uptake to the welcoming for investment in Greenland that's been there for all the time. I mean, there's no restrictions whatsoever on the US, more than there are on the Swedes or the Danes, for that matter. If they want to, they also operate under the Danish laws, the Greenland laws.
Okay, I'm going to move us on because I've got an eye on the time. I want to make sure that we can cover Europe's response, and then we're going to get into NATO separately after that. Before we launch into this segment about Europe, I want you to take a listen to this comment from President Trump recently.
I just say this. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security, and the European Union needs us to have it, and they know that.
The European Union needs us to have it, and they know it. In response, European countries, though, have put up a united front, albeit a rather diplomatic one, in a joint statement by Denmark, France, the UK, Spain, Poland, Germany. They all said that Greenland's future can only be determined by Greenland and Denmark, but they stopped short of outright calling out the US and using strong language against them. As I said, we're going to come to NATO shortly, but Carl, let me ask you, has Europe been strong enough in its defence of Denmark and Greenland, or are they cowering to President Trump?
No, I think they've been fairly clear that they've been very clear on the issue of principle that is there. It so happens that territorial integrity is, it's a rather holy principle. It's a fundamental principle of international law, by the way. And it is very important to Europe. There's a war being fought over that particular issue in the east of Europe, where the President Putin of Russia has said that he has the right to grab pieces of an entire other country. And Europe, as you might have noted, doesn't accept that particular principle. We don't accept anyone else grabbing territories from other countries. So, and that is also why the reaction has been, it might be diplomatic, as you say, but fairly strong. It's about Greenland, absolutely, but it's also about the respect for territorial integrity, which is one of the fundamentals of international law.
Mm-hmm. Rasmus, I can see you nodding your head there. I mean, there was such this huge outpouring of anger at Russia trying to... oh, Carl, we seem to have... your camera has did a little bit of a turn there. We've got you back? Excellent. We saw such an outpouring of defence from Europe when we saw Russia's actions in Ukraine. Why don't you think we're seeing the same staunch anger, angry words, you know, promises of defence from Europe this time, Rasmus? And is it disappointing?
No, I mean, we've been very happy with the support we've gotten from all European capitals, from Canada and from many others. We're very grateful for that, because obviously we're a small country. And we cannot push back against the United States alone. So we need we need assistance from others. So it's very important. This is not a conflict just between United States and Denmark, but that others back us up. And I think Carl is absolutely right. This is crucial for the world order. It's the most unjustified claim to another country's land we've seen in modern history. I'm actually a little surprised how lazy the claim is. Usually countries would at least come up with an excuse for attacking another country and wanting to take their territory. The Russians are claiming they're lying about how the Ukrainians have mistreated a Russian minority. China can point to historical ownership of Taiwan. Hitler made up that the Poles had attacked him when he had invaded Poland. The Americans who say they have a right to Greenland, they don't have any reason for it except they say they need it, which is obviously not really a reason. So it's astonishing that they don't stop themselves from this, because it's so openly unjustified and crazy. And it would lead to the downfall of the entire Western alliance, which is very, very serious. And no one from the United States will be able to tell China not to invade Taiwan, for example, or any other rogue state that wants to take territory. So, it's better for everybody that we respect borders. If we don't, we cannot cooperate. That's a very basic principle for cooperation, that we agree on where the border is and where the United States starts and where Denmark starts. And if we don't agree on that, we cannot cooperate, and we can certainly not have an alliance. And we just hope the Americans will start valuing the idea of having allies, because we can do a lot together. That the West is still invincible, and we can do good things for the world. But we're not going to be part of a club where the idea is that you can just take what you want and you can just crush smaller countries if you are a bigger country.
Bijan, does this set a dangerous precedent? Can President Trump stand there and say it needs Greenland for its own national security, but then turn around and reprimand Russia, or be concerned about China's eyes on Taiwan? Is this dismantling everything that the post-Second World War security alliance has built up over these generations?
I think you're blowing it out of proportion. I think you're ignoring President Trump's style in asking for the moon and then maybe agreeing to something much lower than that. That's his style. So I think this rhetoric is not going where we want it to go. We're allies. We're allies. On the screen, I see 3 allies, 3 NATO members, Sweden, of course, a recent member. Welcome. Fantastic. We can solve this. We should sit down and talk about it. By saying this is nonsense and this is not true and denying it, it's not going to help. You have to sit down like you're trained to do as Prime Minister, the former defense minister or defense committee head. We should sit down and talk about these things. Denial of these concerns, yes, they're strategic. There are no ships, there are no installations. There is no legal basis for taking over Greenland. Of course, we should sit down and address these concerns in true sense, not start from denial, but start from what investments can we grow together? How can we increase the confidence in safety and security and enhancing United States national security concerns? How can we do that? There are many ways to do it. There's no need to do grandstanding and position, just like, countering President Trump with his own style is not going to take us to where we need to go.
Bijan, do you think that Europe could really do anything? Do you think Europe could do anything if America does decide to take Greenland, to annex it by whichever means it wants? Do you think Europe can do anything to stop it?
Maybe Europe is changing, but in the last program we brought up the point that Europe could have done things to stop, slow down, or completely change the picture in Ukraine. Europe didn't do that. Europe only took a hard position when things got really, really bad. So I don't know. Europe is an ally. Europe is a friend. We need to have our shared interests focused on and come up with ways to get out of this confrontational. I don't like Trump. I don't like Trump's policies. He's bad for the world. Whatever he says, he's going to be here for another, 3 years. So let's understand that fact. Let's understand we're dealing with a politician that has a particular style, and try and ignore that. Not fall right into that confrontational setup. Find ways.
Well,
when
I mean,
says we cannot
that
exclude
sounds
that seriously.
that sounds
Yes.
eminently
Okay.
sensible.
All right, Carl, go ahead. Is Europe a friend? Sorry, is the US a friend to Europe and an ally? Is that how it's behaving?
Some of them are not, but I would hope that the US is still an ally and a friend of Europe. But I mean, I can doubt it at times. I mean, what you said sounded to me eminently sensible, but that's not where we are. I mean, you shouldn't be surprised. I mean, you talk about the political
We need to
dialogue.
get there. We need to get there to reduce tension.
Yeah, but you see what happened the other day, for example, when you had the vice or the deputy chief of staff of the White House, Stephen Miller. He was out in a lengthy interview, which was very provocative. He said essentially, apart from saying that Denmark has no right to Greenland even, he said essentially that might is right. International law is niceties. And the only law that applies in international affairs is the law of the jungle. I mean, you couldn't really expect that there would not be reactions against statements of that sort. And he's not President Trump. He's the deputy chief of staff of the White House. And after that, there was a statement from the White House saying that they are different. They're looking now at options for taking over Greenland, and they do not exclude the use of military force. I mean, Europeans would be very, very strange if Europeans didn't react to that.
Rasmus, what do you think? I mean, Europe has always championed this rules-based order and adherence to international law, but across various theatres of conflict, Gaza, Iraq, Libya, you know, it has fueled claims of selective enforcement. Is Europe now paying the price for these double standards?
I'm sure a lot of countries will feel that way because they feel that they've been unfairly treated. I would say we've failed in many things. Like Iraq did turn out to be a complete disaster. So of course we bear responsibility for having been together with the Americans in some of those strategic mistakes. But we have never tried to sort of go and destroy another country, or we've not used our force to try to grab territory from another country to make it our own. So I mean, I think we try to respect international law, and we don't start wars with others. We also don't threaten others with war that don't pose a threat to us or haven't done nothing to us at all. So I think, I mean, there is a point, of course, that we have to talk to the Americans. We have to listen to their concerns, but it's extremely counterproductive to start threatening with military force. When you get asked the question, can you rule out military force against Denmark? It should be the world's easiest question to answer. And when it's asked again and again, and the Americans keep saying, no, we can't, it's on the table, it's a threat. And objectively, it is a very serious threat that a large country is threatening to take territory from another country. That's almost the oldest threat in the book, the definition of a threat from another country. So you can't expect that you can just say stuff like that and repeat it over and over and over again, and then we're going to have a nice civil talk, and we're going to continue to be best friends. So it does have very serious consequences, but of course, I mean, nothing has happened so far, and we hope we can get back on track and have a good conversation. The problem that we have in Denmark is, what can we actually give to the United States that they don't already have in Greenland? Because they already have complete, full, and exclusive military access. They just decided not to use it because there is no threat against Greenland. So they don't have a need for troops up there. So currently they have 150 troops. They used to have 15,000, so they downscaled their own presence by 99%. And now they're saying that they need Greenland for national security, but they already have the full access that they're not using. If they want to do mining, as Carl said before, Greenland is open for it, but you have to put up the investments, which you would also have to do if you own the place. and it's really expensive. The reason there is little mining in Greenland is because mining in Arctic conditions is super expensive. So every type of rare earth that exists in Greenland also exists other places in the world, and the most expensive place to extract them is Greenland, because there's almost no infrastructure, and you have to work under Arctic conditions where machines break down, and you have several months of the year where it's complete darkness and so on. So it's really difficult and very expensive.
Yeah.
And that's the reason you don't have mining. But if the Americans want to do mining, all they had to do was call us, pick up the phone, say, we would like to have another military base. And Denmark would say, fine, no problem, go ahead. We want to invest in mining in Greenland. Okay, do it. There's no obstacles, there's no objections to that.
Okay.
And therefore it's really difficult really to see what can we give them that they don't already have. And that's kind of the problem that we have. They can get a symbolic victory, like they can open another military base or something, and they can claim that they won a victory. But they really already have the option of doing that. So the question we're asking is, why is it necessary to escalate it to a situation where you're talking about invading?
I can answer that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, very briefly, Bijan, and then I'm going to move us on to NATO. Go ahead.
Recent surveys show that 85% of Greenlanders don't want anybody to be over them. They want independence. This is not something that's talked about very often as well. That's a reality. Greenlanders want to be independent. Okay, so if they're independent, all of a sudden we have Chinese strong presence, Russian strong presence, the ice has melted, new water routes have been opened, they've been exploited by what could be potentially threats to us. It's not nonsense, sir. It is reality. And by denying it, you're ignoring the possibility of solving, reducing tension. Accept it. Look at it. It's a clear potential. If Greenland goes independent, we face an existing situation. So why are we proactively thinking about it? It's not about, we have no legal standing to invade Greenland. People of Greenland don't want anybody to be over them. It's just their surveys. I don't know. I don't have any other data.
No,
Okay. All right. I'm just going to interrupt you there, Bijan. I'm going to give it to Carl because I need to keep us going. We're almost out of time. Carl, a quick response from you.
Yeah, very quickly. It is right. I mean, the Greenlanders want independence. I think that's a long-term prospects, and they all say that they are not ready for it as of yet. But that's for them to decide. But I've never heard any Greenlander says that they want to leave NATO. So from the security point of view, that doesn't make much of a difference. The security commitment from all NATO countries for Greenland would remain the same.
Okay, you bring up NATO, and that brings us to our final segment, because Denmark and the US are founding members of the NATO alliance. President Trump says his annexation of Greenland would not only ensure US security, but galvanise global security as well. But the Danish Prime Minister has a very different take. She's boldly declared that a US takeover would mark the end of NATO. Carl, is she right? Would it be the end of NATO?
It would certainly be, yeah, it could well be, but hope we don't get there. If the United States were to invade Denmark or Danish territory, it would be sort of unheard of.
Do you think this is what President Trump is actively seeking, this breakdown of the current world order?
I don't think he's necessarily seeking it, but he doesn't care about the world order. I don't think he's actively seeking it, but it's fairly obvious if you listen to Stephen Miller the other day, that things that allies and international order and things like that is not the way they're thinking. It's the application of force, the law of the jungle. That is the way, at least he is speaking. Not necessarily everyone. I think Secretary of State is somewhat more polite, somewhat more diplomatic, but what's coming out of the White House is clearly something that is fairly revolutionary.
It was a bit of a cheeky question, Bijan. I saw you smirking there.
Yeah, it's like, I was thinking, can President Trump do anything without being accused of wanting to change the world order and wanting to invade countries?
Well, because he keeps saying he's going to throw out the rule book.
You're hostile. I haven't heard you say one word about acknowledging China's expansionism, mercantilism, and Russia's militarization. These are the two facts. They're the elephant in the room. If we don't address them, we will not get to a solution. We should take a path of reducing tension. That's what I'm trying to do here. My position is not a partisan. My position is a technical one. We have a diplomatic complexity. It requires a diplomatic solution. I don't agree with threats. I don't agree with, we're allies. We should be able, we have two very good frameworks to work with, NATO and 1951 Pact. Why don't we use that? Why do we keep talking past each other and raising the tensions when we have a solution in the horizon? We're looking at it. Let's change the tone. Let's sit down, acknowledge. When someone says Russia is not a threat ever, I smile. When somebody says China is not expansionist, I smile.
Okay, all right. Carl, Rasmus, I'm going to bring you in just a moment, but Carl, a response from you?
Just very, very briefly. Russia is a threat. I mean, you might have noticed that we Europeans have spent quite some time trying to get Mr. Trump to understand that Russia is a threat to the European security. And we have been investing heavily in helping Ukraine defend itself, while the American contribution has been, under President Trump, less than impressive.
Rasmus, let me put this to you then. Wouldn't Europe, and including Denmark, including Greenland, be safer if it was in US hands? I mean, this is the biggest military in the world, the full might of the US military right there on your doorstep. Surely that would be a bigger deterrent if what Carl is saying, and Bijan, that there is a threat economically too. The US can invest more and allow, as he says, to make the people of Greenland richer than they ever imagined. Isn't this potentially a good thing?
Not at all, no. Denmark has a very good size for taking care of Greenland. We're big enough to be able to do it.
Even though the majority of people in Greenland subsist on farming and handouts from Denmark?
Greenland. How about cooperation, sir? Cooperation. Let's get out of this confrontation. You keep saying taking over. Put taking over outside the discussion, bring in cooperation.
Okay.
I think that's the way to push it.
All right, Rasmus?
Well, I don't accept responsibility for having a confrontation. It's the Americans that keep talking about militarily attacking Denmark and Greenland. If you don't understand why that gives a confrontation, then you should think it through. You should think it through better.
We'll just let Rasmus finish his answer there.
Denmark has a very good size for taking care of Greenland. We're big enough to be able to help the Greenlanders with everything they need to develop Greenland in the direction that they want it to be developed in. We're also small enough that we don't provoke big powers, and we've been able to keep it as a low tension area. And we've kept China and Russia completely out of Greenland. We've addressed the Americans' concerns in that way. We've allowed the Americans to have military up there so they could use Greenland to protect North America against Russian nuclear weapons and so on, things that could fly over Greenland. So it's worked really well so far, really well. And the Greenlanders is the one indigenous people in the world that has the most autonomy, the most freedom. There's no other indigenous population anywhere that has that much autonomy in almost independent country. So it works very well for them, and we take really good care of it compared to, for example, American overseas territories like U.S. Virgin Islands, Samoa. If you compare the living conditions, they are much better in Greenland. So it has worked very well, and everybody's been very happy about it. We've had great cooperation with the Americans until 1 year ago, when they started threatening about taking over instead of just calling us and tell us that they needed something else, some more military presence or whatever. They could have gotten it very, very easily. So there is really no need for all this drama and all this this confrontation. But it's not us that's creating it. I mean, you have to understand that we cannot just sit and watch an American president threaten our citizens. People in Greenland are scared. You know, they're scared because they hear these threats all the time. It causes a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and it's completely unreasonable to both the people of Greenland, the people of Denmark, and it's unnecessary and it's destructive for the power of the Western Alliance and for peace in the world. Okay. It undermines all attempts to keep peace in the world when a country acts like this.
We're almost out of time. I just want to put a quick question to you, Carl, and then I'm going to come to all of you for a very quick response. But just before we end, Carl, everything that we've heard over the last weeks, months, whether it be about Greenland, Russia, Ukraine, tariffs, are you seeing a different world increasingly where Europe and America are less allies, more adversaries?
Well, I'm certainly seeing a different world where we have a different take on the global order, where sort of listen to the White House is the law of the jungle, and the biggest tiger wins. While we Europeans would like to see as much as possible about a global order where everyone has rights, those with big power and those with small power, because we think that brings more stability for each and every one long term, not only for the big tigers.
Okay, as I said, we're just about out of time. Let me do a rapid fire question to each of you. Carl, let's go you first. How does this crisis end? Handshakes or heartache?
I don't know. That's the honest answer.
Bijan, how does it end?
I believe it ends as most matters between NATO allies get resolved. We have frameworks for it. I'm very optimistic. There is no legal basis for taking over Greenland. That's a fact. People of Greenland don't want to be under anybody. They don't want to be, they want to be independent. The fear is that in that independence, they already have deals in there that puts Russia and China right above our head. And that's something that the United States cannot ignore. Mm-hmm. We hope our allies understand that, and we sit down and talk about it. There are ways. There are many ways to do this. I mean, you gentlemen talked about it, how we can do mining together, how we can do exploration in economic development for the betterment of the life for the Greenlanders and for this tension to come to an end. Why don't we go to that? Why don't we go to partnerships as opposed to confrontation? And it's easy, and I understand, politicians, policymakers need to take a stance, need to take a stance of power and showing confidence to their people. They have to do that. But be careful, because if you do too much of that, you fall from the other side of the roof, and you get away from solutions.
Okay.
Europe and the United States are allies. We have many ties with some countries, permanent and unchangeable relations, and certainly I'm looking at two very important members of NATO, and there is a way to solve this. I'm very optimistic.
Okay, all right.
I don't fall into rhetoric. I try to delve into reality and address things as respectfully as I can. Nobody's opinion is nonsense.
Okay, all right. I have to wrap it up because we're running out of time. Rasmus, how does this end? Are you as optimistic as Bijan is?
No, the next step is likely going to be that the Americans will try to bribe the Greenlanders into leaving Denmark, which is equally unacceptable. Like imagine China going to Hawaii and try to bribe the people there to leave the United States and become part of China. No country's going to accept that. So that will lead to a new round of confrontations. But eventually, I hope things will settle down and status quo will be preserved for Greenland, but we'll have a Western alliance that has been damaged, unfortunately, a lot, and we'll have a Europe that has been, so upset by these threats and this unreliability from the Americans that Europe will look more to strengthen itself, to free itself from the Americans, and unfortunately. Not work as closely together as we have before. And I think it's very sad. We don't want it that way, but that's probably what will happen.
It's been a very interesting discussion. We appreciate all of you. It's going to be interesting weeks and months ahead. Bijan Kian, President of the Institute for Voices of Liberty and former US official. Carl Bildt, former Prime Minister of Sweden, and Rasmus Jarlov, Danish MP for the Conservative Party and Chair of the Parliament's Defence Committee. Gentlemen, thank you for being on Counterpoints. And thank you to you at home for tuning in to this episode of Counterpoints. Keep up to date with our latest debates and interviews by subscribing to Al Arabiya English on YouTube and follow us on X and TikTok. We'll see you next time.